The fast of Ramadan was established as an obligatory observance in the year 2 AH, appended by the duty imposed upon Muslims of paying zakat, alms tax, poor due. Zakat, alms tax, poor due, in order to alleviate the burden of the needy immigrants. A wonderful and striking coincidence was the establishment of Shawwal, Eid, the festival of the fast breaking. Directly after the manifest victory of Badr, it was actually the finest spectacle ever witnessed, of Muslims leaving their houses praying, acclaiming Allah's name and entertaining His praise at the top of their voices in recognition of His favour and grace. At last but not least, the support He rendered them, and through which the forces of the truth overpowered those of evil. And remember when you were few and were reckoned weak in the land, and were afraid that men might kidnap you. But He provided a safe place for you, strengthened you with His help, and provided you with good things, so that you might be grateful. The military activities between Badr and Uhud. The Battle of Badr was the first armed encounter between the Muslims and Quraysh. It was in fact a decisive battle that gave the Muslims a historic victory, acknowledged by all the Arabs, and dealt a heavy blow to the religious and economic interests of the polytheists. There were also the Jews, who also used to regard each Islamic victory as a heavy blow to their religious economic entity. Both parties were burning with rage and fury since the Muslims had achieved that great victory. Verily, you will find the strongest among men in enmity to the believers, Muslims, the Jews, and al-Mushrikun, polytheists, pagans, idolaters, and disbelievers. Both resentful parties had their much more indignant suit in the form of hypocrites, who faked Islam just to save their faces. At the head of one came Abdullah and his retinue, the desert Bedouins living in tents pitched in the vicinity of Medina, who departed on plundering and looting as a means of living, were totally indifferent to this actual question of belief and disbelief. Their worry deprived them from fear of losing their perverted avenues of subsistence in case a powerful nascent Muslim state should rise up and put an end to such ill practices. Hence the grudge they nursed against Islam and the Muslims in general, and the person of Muhammad in particular. The whole cause of faith was thus at stake, with four furious parties laying ambushes against the new religion, each in its style pretension to Islam, embedded with conspiracy, plots, and provocative deeds within Medina, explicitly uncovered animosity pregnant with indignation and fire of rage on the part of the Jews, and there in Mecca, open and persistent calls for vengeance, coupled with open intentions to mobilize all potential resources available to silence the violence of Islam once and for all. This was later translated into military action, Uhud invasion, which left a very bad impression on the good name and esteem that the Muslims were painstakingly working to merit and preserve. The Muslims were always obliged to be on the lookout for any hostile movements, and it was imperative on them to launch preemptive strikes in all directions in order to enjoy a reasonable degree of security in this great instability provoking ocean of unrest. The following is a list of military activities conducted in the post-Badr era. Al-Qadr invasion. The scouting body of Medina reported that Banu Salim of Ghatafan were engaged in mustering troops to invade the Muslims. The Prophet took the initiative himself and mounted a surprise attack on them in their own homeland at a watering place called Al-Qudr. Banu Salim, on receiving the news, had fled before he arrived. He stayed there for 3 days, took their 500 camels as booty, and distributed them to the fighters after he had set aside with usual 1/5. Each one gained 2 camels. This invasion took place in Shawwal in the year 288, 7 days after the event of Badr. An attempt on the life of the Prophet. The impact of defeat at Badr was so great that the Meccans began to burn with indignation and resentment over their horrible losses. To resolve this situation, 2 polytheists volunteered to quench their thirst and muffle the source of that humiliation. The Prophet, a terrible polytheist, and an archenemy, Safwan, sat together privately, lamenting their loss and remembering their dead and captives. Umar expressed a fervent desire to kill the Prophet and release his captured son in Medina. If it was not for the yoke of debts he was under and the large family he had to support, Safwan also had his good reasons to see the Prophet killed, so he offered to discharge Umar's debts and support his family if he went on with his plan. Umar agreed and asked Safwan to be reticent on the whole scheme. He left them for Medina, having with him a sword to which he applied some kind of lethal poison, saw him at the door of the mosque, and understood that he had come with evil intentions. He immediately went into the mosque and informed the Prophet. He was let in looped by the sling of his sword, and in greeting he said, "Good morning," to which the Prophet replied that Allah had been gracious and taught them the greeting of the dwellers of the paradise, peace be upon you, to a question raised by the Prophet about his object, that he had come to see that his captured son was well treated. As for the sword, peace with which the Prophet asked him about, he cursed it and said that it gained them nothing on exhorting him to tell his real goal. He remained obdurate and did not divulge the secret meeting with Safwan. Here the Prophet got impatient, and he himself revealed to Umar his secret mission. Was taken by surprise, and incredible astonishment seized him, and immediately bore witness to the messengership of Muhammad. He then began to entertain Allah's praise, but for having been guided to the straight path, the Prophet was pleased and asked his companions to teach Umar the principles of Islam, recite to him the noble Quran, and release his son from captivity. Safwan, meanwhile, was still entertaining false illusions as to the approaching redemption of honor and burying the memory of Badr into oblivion. He was impatiently awaiting Umar's news, but to his great surprise, he was told that the man had embraced Islam and changed into a devoted believer. Umar later came back to Mecca, where he started to call people onto Islam, and he did actually manage to convert a lot of Meccans into Islam. Invasion of Bani Qaynuqa. We have already spoken about the treaty that the Prophet signed with the Jews. He was very careful to abide by it to the letter, and the Muslims did not show the least violation of any of its provisions. The Jews, however, whose natural disposition is closely linked to treachery, betrayal, and covenant breaching, could not rid themselves of the tradition of theirs, and started a process of intrigues and trouble-making, with the aim of producing schism in the growing solid Muslim ranks. Here is a relevant model of their behavior. Shaz, an elderly Jew, a terrible